Welcome everyone to our second episode of the return of the NBA here on Nuts and Bolts Sports. You can see on the bottom right here, I am Raj, that's Jordan. Wrong way. But we are here talking about the NBA after the first weekend of its return. We came to you guys last Thursday, Friday, after the first couple of games of the restart of the season. And as we discussed last week, we're going to be going live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings. Most likely, that's the plan right now. But let's just get right into it because these are going to be in sort of short snippets. That's our goal with this sort of live broadcast scheme. And let's just get right into it. Jordan, I asked you before we started recording which one you want to talk about more. I'm going to let you pick. I'm going to toss the question up. Who do you want to talk about first? Who do you want to complain about first? The Lakers or the Sixers?
That's a great question. I'm gonna get it's like eating your vegetables first. So I'm gonna get the Sixers out of the way because
Okay.
anyone who knows me knows I'm not a big Sixers fan. And honestly, it's not even that. Just so much as like a basketball fan and someone who recognizes like how good they could be. I'm still like in shock that they lost. I know upsets happen. Anybody can beat anybody on a good day, but I can't find an excuse with no Sabonis, with Oladipo. He wasn't bad, but he's still kind of rusty. And then you're supposed to have a fully healthy Sixers squad, and Embiid and Simmons and Horford and those guys have had 3.5 months off. There's no excuse for them to lose. Doesn't help that I probably had money on it. I can't really admit to that on air, but yeah. But just like, I don't know, I was watching the highlights too, and I watched most of the fourth, and that's where obviously Indy did most of their damage because they outscored them by 12. Nobody from Philly stepped up, not Simmons, not Horford. Nobody stepped up to kind of try and shut TJ Warren down. And I think he's been a very good scorer all his career, but I don't know if he's he's not the first guy to score 50 points in the bubble.
Yeah, TJ Warren, 53 points, just ridiculous, insane. He followed that up today with another solid game against the Wizards. So, this guy is picking up the slack for Indiana. We've got the Nuts and Bolts account here in the comments saying Sixers are a tease, and that's the truth. This was another thing we were discussing before we went live. I had the Sixers coming out of the East, and yeah, there's just something not clicking with this team, and it's rough to see because they are so talented, like you said, and there's just so much potential there. And the fact that it's not working is disappointing. You thought the addition of Horford might help to change the sort of dynamic between Simmons and Embiid, and then now they have Simmons. Who knows what even position they're playing him at. Like they say they're playing him at the 4. I don't know if he's actually playing the 4 or not. It doesn't look like it. But he's got his hesitancies. Embiid is an up and down player, as is. It's tough to watch that team play. And yeah, when TJ Warren goes off of 50 plus, like what are you gonna do? What are you really gonna do? But let's talk about the Lakers a little bit. Maybe we can use that to discuss some of the other games from the weekend that we want to touch on. We obviously talked about the LA matchup last week, but then they followed up that performance with a loss to the Toronto Raptors. And this was something in particular that we honed on the last broadcast, and that was LeBron. And still, he just doesn't look like the LeBron that we should be seeing out there. Like, still just looks like he's hesitating, looks like he's frustrated, doesn't look like he's in the headspace to be winning basketball games, which is weird because he's the guy who had access to every workout facility in this sort of 4-month hiatus. What do you want to talk about the Lakers now?
Yeah, definitely a disappointing loss, and it's one of those things, they're just getting restarted here in the bubble, so you don't want to put too much stock into one single loss, especially when they're so close to having the 1 seed wrapped up. But it was surprising the fact that they did. If they would have won that game, they would have clinched the 1 seed, which I thought would have been a huge motivation. So that way they could really plan out their next 6 games afterwards in terms of resting guys, getting maybe guys like J.R. Smith and Deion Waiters some more minutes acclimated in the system. But it just didn't happen. And like you said, LeBron wasn't great in the first game against the Clippers, and he bailed them out. He did what he's been doing over the last couple of years with the good defense at the end, and obviously the game-winning putback there. But he was minus 20 against Toronto. He just seemed kind of passive. And Anthony Davis too. The two of them combined for 22 shots in a game, which one of them should be taking right around that, just themselves. So it was just a disappointing overall game. It's one of those, do you play? Is it a blip in the road? Is it a serious problem? It's probably somewhere in between. I have zero confidence that they would beat Toronto in a series. But I think that goes kind of for a lot of teams. Toronto is they're humming right now. They had a nice hard-fought win against Miami today that we saw, and they just play good basketball. On offense, the ball moves. Nobody cares who shoots. And
Nick Nurse, coach of the year. Nick Nurse is definitely coach of the year. I have no doubt about it.
Yeah, well, he got gypped. You see, they came out with the vote today.
Oh yeah, today,
He was
yeah,
technically
yeah,
one away from a
yeah,
three-way tie,
right.
but he deserves as much credit as anybody. I mean, you lose the best player in the league, in Kawhi Leonard, and you come out and you have better point differential, more wins. You're dominating at a higher level, and on defense too. I mean, just watching them today against Miami. I mean, it's what I said. I tweeted about it. I says high school and college teams should just watch their film because it's just constant communication on both ends, constant movement on both ends. Everybody's got everybody's backs. There's no you can tell that's a team that trusts each other, which you don't see a lot in the NBA. Take a look at probably the Sixers, who are probably the opposite of that in terms of trusting, and it makes a difference. It really does. So Toronto is a team that has looked really good through this restart, and I think they will. I think they're going to meet Milwaukee in the Eastern Conference Finals, and that's going to be a heavyweight battle. If Milwaukee's not fully there, if they make a misstep, it could be just like last year.
Yeah, let's use that to transition into some of Milwaukee's games from the weekend, and in particular, I kind of want to hone in on the Houston game just because I think Houston has kind of been the surprise team out of the bubble. No defense being played in those games other than maybe the last 5 minutes of the game where they really turn it on and lock in. But that Milwaukee Houston game from yesterday was just so fun to watch Giannis and James Harden. Actually, even more so Russell Westbrook yesterday go at it. That was one of the funnest matchups. Houston's had the two funnest matchups for me so far in this entire thing. First being their 500-point game against Dallas a couple days ago, and then this matchup against Milwaukee. Any thoughts on the Rockets or the Bucks for that matter?
Well, with the Rockets, I said once they've started to go small, and I still stick by it. I'm going to ride it until they either win the title or they lose in the second round. I think that it's a gimmick. I think that the gimmick is going to wear off. But I said when they started, I said they were going to catch some teams by surprise because they play hard. It's not like they don't try. They got 5 shooters on the floor at all times, which is really tough if you don't game plan for that. And like you said, you mentioned Harden was obviously played decently well to start the bubble. Westbrook's been probably their best overall player for the last 2 or 3 months. I mean, of games that they actually played. I think the last 30 games or something like that, he's 30 points a game. He's got 50% field goal, which for Westbrook, who's kind of known as more of an inefficient scorer in our time. I mean, he's really stepped up, and they have these I guess Swiss Army knife would be the word. With Covington on defense, with Tucker, those guys will switch and guard point guard, center, anything in between. So you do have to give them credit for that. Milwaukee's tough because they're missing a couple guys like Bledsoe isn't playing right now.
Exactly.
I don't think Connaughton played either. So, But Giannis looks. I mean, the numbers he puts up in only 32, 33 minutes it's absurd.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing we've been saying for 2 years. He's only getting better. He's only getting better. So
He's 25 years old or something like that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So it's one of those things. I don't want to look past this year because obviously we have so much. How many great games left in a great playoffs, but I just can't imagine what he's going to be when he develops even better passing skills, a better 3-point shot. He is a terror. And if anybody can, take him out of Milwaukee and sign him somewhere, they really should because it will help.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the limited minutes because that's what stands out to me the most is the fact that in these limited minutes, and this is something that he's been doing last season and this season, won MVP last season and playing, God, what was he at? He was under 35 minutes a game, if I'm not mistaken, last season, which is just insane because this team is just so good, so deep, so well-rounded, incredibly well coached. Chris Middleton playing well as well, in the absence of Eric Bledsoe, Chris Middleton really picking up the slack. They're already a great player and pulling his weight. We got Kevin Woods in the comments saying Giannis can be defended in the half court. I disagree with that. I feel like Giannis is the most dominant player since Shaq, maybe in the half court. That guy is. He's just so long, so big, so strong, and just gets to the basket at will. And it's just kind of insane to see, honestly. And I think it showed against Houston because Houston's defensive issues did show throughout. I mean, again, with Houston, it's this kind of thing where it's just we're going to keep up with you on offense. And then in these past 2 games in particular, they're in the last 5 minutes, we're going to strap in a defense and really try to steal the game from you because they know they can keep up with anybody on the offensive end. Dallas is the number 1 offense in the league, if I'm not mistaken, right? So, the fact that, that game, that's obvious. That game went to almost 150 points for both teams. And they kept up with it. I've been impressed by Houston. And yeah, Milwaukee, tough loss to Houston, but I think it's still kind of par for the course. I'm going to toss it to you. Are there any other players or anything that you want to hone in on that we haven't discussed yet that maybe stood out to you from the weekend's performances?
I know we had kind of touched on it earlier today. It's probably good to bring it up here. The interesting start for Tatum comes out and is just
What, two for 18 or
unfathomably
something?
crusty.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
and it wasn't like he was like forcing a lot. He was missing like floaters in the lane. He was missing wide open looks. Like I don't felt that I didn't feel like he was like trying to get his shot no matter what. Like he was getting it within the flow of that offense. It just wasn't. They weren't going in. And then he turns around and admittedly, obviously, Portland is a much weaker team in terms of their wings, especially. That's probably their weakest spot. So like it was nice to see him rebound against them. I'm interested to see how he does moving forward, because obviously he's probably the biggest piece. With Kemba's knees being pretty shaky, it's going to be, Tatum 1, Brown 2, and then probably like Hayward 3.
Yeah.
But the Boston will go as far as like Tatum can take him, because he can just. Brown's a good offensive player. Tatum, when he's on his game, is elite, and we saw that before the bubble those last 3 months, where he really kind of ascended to that superstar level. So I'm interested to see if he can kind of regain that, and not just against a team like Portland, against teams that they're going to face in the playoffs. If they do face a Toronto, where you're going to have a great defensive scheme, or you do face Milwaukee again, that kind of stuff. So I'm really interested to see what he does.
Yeah, it's Tatum is the most interesting case study maybe in the Eastern Conference right now in terms of singular players, just because like we saw, and he's still so young, like he's 21 years old or something too, like he's only in his third season, and we saw the flashes of greatness in his rookie season in that playoff series against the Cavs, where he was smoking LeBron even like in that series. Is ridiculous, and we know that he has it in him to have the potential to show greatness, and he just needs to find that consistency. And I don't think he's going to ever have as bad of a game from this point forward that he did in that first game of this restart where he went 2 for 18. I just don't see that happening. And we saw that. I think the maturity is actually there in seeing the way that he recovered against Portland and led his team to a big win against Portland. I think that was an important showing for Tatum. I want to ask you a little bit about Zion as well. I think you have the game on in the background. I unfortunately don't have it on in front of me. Thoughts, we talked about it a little bit last week as well, the sort of minutes restriction and whatnot, but in that second game that Zion played against the Clippers, and now what he's doing now, what are your thoughts on sort of what we've seen, any progression, any sort of development from when we first spoke about him?
Well, I think like what you're seeing now is, obviously his minutes are going to slowly start to increase, because there was kind of that whole thing about how he was upset that he didn't really play a lot, especially in that first game at the end, which was, I thought, just a big misstep. But it's a tough situation, like we talked about, I think, last week, where you said you have the number 1 pick, he's got the injury concerns, and he could be your franchise for the next 10 years. Like, you really have to maneuver it carefully, and I don't know if there's necessarily like a correct sheet that you have to follow step by step. Like, you just kind of have to. It's an ebb and flow thing. They have to feel it out in New Orleans and feel when they can play him a little bit more, and stuff like that. I mean, offensively, he's a tank. He's just so big. Guys seem to bounce off of him, which I don't think we don't talk about players in that regard really anymore, especially since it's a more finesse, perimeter game. But guys even like LeBron, when he got to be 2009 Cleveland Reigns, guys kind of bounced off him in the lane. Obviously, Shaq and those dudes.
Giannis now, yeah,
exactly, those kind of guys. But that's it. It's few and far between in terms of guys bouncing off, and I think he does that. The big area that he's obviously going to have to work on, just like any rookie, is defense, and he's got more defensive holes than people realize, because he had some steals and blocks at Duke that were at the hands of, I don't know, not great competition, I guess would be the way to phrase it. Not that he's not a good athlete, but you can get away with a lot of stuff in college that you cannot get away with in the pros. So that's probably the biggest area of concern if he's going to be, the guy in the next couple of years. He's going to have to work on that. But they definitely have an interesting thing here, that they're vying for that last seed in the playing game, and with the Spurs coming out here hot, that really puts some pressure on New Orleans. I think they're 3.5 back now of the 8 seed, but they're a game and a half back from the Spurs for the play-in. So they're still in a good spot. It's not they're not. They obviously want to win tonight against Memphis. That would be huge, obviously, to bring Memphis a little bit down and have them rise up. So it's going to be interesting to see how, as we get closer to the 7th and 8th games, how his minutes are affected based on how good of a chance that they have to at least be in the playing game.
No, definitely. From what you're mentioning about Zion and people basically bouncing off of him because of his size and because of his athleticism. And then Kevin Woods again in the comments is Zion's injury prone. And that, that does draw a little bit of concern for me, because there was that report that came out earlier today about, the fact that scouts think that Zion's moving slower than he was even in the off season with that leg injury that kind of held him back. And who knows if that is actually something that's affecting him, because New Orleans is going to be very coy about it. We know that much. New Orleans, David Griffin is a very smart GM. He knows what he's doing, but he's not going to give away any of his secrets. And I think that's pretty clear from the way that he's managed that New Orleans team and Zion situation in particular. So, does the fact that he is that sort of player, does that maybe make him even more injury prone, and does that make it even more risky for the Pelicans to play him heavy minutes here? Having dropped 2 already, they're not playing all that well. Brandon Ingram's playing well. JJ Redick is fighting for his playoff life right now. But outside, Lonzo Ball has been atrocious. I'm not a big Lonzo Ball fan. I thought he very much improved this season in New Orleans, but I'm still, I'm not liking the way that that's working right now. It just doesn't look good. I'm a bit worried for New Orleans in particular, and I'll use that to sort of transition into some of those other playoff fringe teams because, yeah, you mentioned it, San Antonio. Never count Greg Popovich out. Two wins here, and again, this is a pretty small sample size. Two games max for a lot of these teams, but a lot of these lower seed fringe teams, New Orleans, Memphis, Portland, San Antonio, Phoenix, Sacramento, they're all playing each other. So, when one team wins, it knocks the other one down. So, yeah, San Antonio is now in that sort of play-in seeding, New Orleans being the team behind them and then Portland being behind them because Portland lost one of their games. Are you seeing the Spurs keeping Greg Popovich's streak alive?
It's tough because I've always gone with the don't bet against Pop no matter what. And I really thought they were done when Aldridge decided that he was going to have season-ending surgery. So I was like, they really are missing their best overall player. Yeah. DeRozan's not. He's shown time and time again back in Toronto that he's not a guy that can really lead your team and put them on his back per se. Sure. But they've come out these first 2 games and they've just been playing typical Spurs basketball. The ball moves. They play fundamentally sound. They don't shoot themselves in the foot too much. I still think there's too much talent between Memphis. A couple of tweaks with New Orleans, and they could be playing really well. Sure. And then even who are we missing there? Portland too. I mean, if Dame gets hot, like Dame, he had a good game, yesterday or 2 days ago, but he. Yes. I think he's kind of still shaking off some of the rust too. And he's a guy that we saw, going into the bubble, to the break, where he was, on absolute fire. And he's someone that can just, 40, 45 a night, especially in a situation like this where, he knows that every win is crucial. So I think at the end, there's going to be a little bit too much to keep the Spurs out of it. But I think one thing that we can kind of touch on that relates to these playoff teams and how close we are is I think what a great job the NBA did of like setting it up like this. Obviously initially it was like, oh, okay, they're taking 9 Eastern Conference teams and they're taking 13 West, and I was like, 13 seems like a weird number, but yet all these games have been good. They've been relatively close for the most part.
Exactly.
Phoenix has been playing well.
They're 2-0. They're 2-0. Yeah, they beat Dallas yesterday. That was, a comeback win too. Not even just
they're down 13.5, and they came back to beat Dallas, which is not. That's with guys like Booker and Aiton's playing well, and even it's Miles Bridges out there.
Yes, yeah, I believe so.
I always forget there's 2 Bridges, and I always forget where they're at. But he's been playing, so they've had a nice little start there as well. And that's what I heard somebody say too. It's like it's just so nice to see all these close games and not see like, oh, the Jazz are playing the Hawks tonight. It's like that doesn't, that's not a game I want to tune into. So it's so nice that they really cut out. Like I know it sucks for the other 8 teams to not get invited, but at the same time, I think that was for the best. And just seeing like high level close games every night. I think that the lack of defense has been, that's just rust. You don't play against somebody else for a couple months.
We have fun in All-Star games, so we can have fun with this.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that'll settle down too. But I think just overall, like the way that Adam Silver and these guys set it up has just made for, like you said, every time somebody plays somebody, it affects the seeding like directly. Again, there's no Clippers playing, the Warriors with no Steph Curry and no Clay, where like the game literally doesn't do anything for anybody. Every game, every day is crucial, and I think that really is important, and it's fun. It makes it fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like in terms of the quality of the games, like this is just it's what we've been going for 5 days and it's already been incredible. Like we started off on the right note with those 2 incredible like back and forth games on day 1, and it really kept up the momentum since. Again from like the Dallas Houston matchup from the night after to yesterday's couple matchups with Houston Milwaukee and then Boston and Portland. Like just some incredible games. I want to hone in a little, just one more like sort of point on some of these playoff fringe teams. I'm kind of now, because of this strong start from San Antonio, and obviously DeMar DeRozan kind of has that experience in terms of being in pressure situations. He's dropped the ball a couple of times, but he's also capitalized a couple of times, and he capitalized here. Why I'm most if I had to, I was saying this before it all started, that the one team I wanted to pick in terms of that group that was there was Portland, just because I didn't feel comfortable betting against Dame. And then with Nurk coming back, and Nurk has shown up. He's played really, really well. Zach Collins is putting in solid minutes as well. Both those guys, were the big pieces that Portland was missing this season. And I'm
Collins
glad.
shooting threes now.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And that team, I think they've looked good even in the loss to Boston. I think they still looked very good. But what's concerning for me is their schedule moving forward. Like they have teams like the Clippers, the Mavericks, the Nuggets. They only have one team that's not very good, and it's the Nets. And the other 5 teams that they have left to play are tough teams. And that's what's most concerning about me for Portland. And that's why I'm kind of starting to lean towards now San Antonio maybe being able to seal this up, because I just don't think New Orleans has the sort of experience to capitalize now after having dropped 2 losses in a row. I'm a bit scared for them, if I'm being completely honest with you.
Yeah, and it's tough because I feel like if you like put all the see the 9, 10, 11, even if you throw Memphis in there, you throw like 8 through 13 there in the West, and you throw them all up on paper and you look at the rosters, you'd say, I think New Orleans probably is the most overall talent. Like Booker might be, the best player out of all those teams or whatever. But then you look at overall, it's Ingram is very good. Drew and Lonzo are could be a devastating backcourt, especially on defense.
Yeah.
Zion is Zion, depending on how many minutes. Like they have so many different pieces and so much, I think, top to bottom talent. But like you said, the veterans that they do have, like JJ Redick's a good veteran, a good locker room guy by all accounts, but he's not like he does one thing very, very well, but he does one thing. Like he can't. Yeah. There's times where you can't play him. And so that doesn't help them. Like Drew Holiday is a veteran and a really, again, same thing, good locker room guy, a guy you'd love to have on pretty much any team in the league. But he's also more of like a lead by example and not like, hey, like climb on my back. We need to tighten up here. Like, he's not going to not yell at dudes on TV, but he's not going to have those like confrontational situations the way that like guys like LeBron will and like some of these other big name guys. He's more of a quiet reserve guy. Like he just sprained his ankle.
Oh, did he really? So that's not good.
Sorry. It's like jinx that one.
This is why we need somebody watching the game live as we're recording right now.
Well, in the last minute, Ja took a knee to where the sun doesn't shine, and then Drew, he kind of got tripped up. I think he'll be okay. It was ironically tripped by Grayson Allen, which is poetic. Yeah. But yeah, so but the point is, like I said, I would looking at it on paper, you'd like to take them, but I just don't know if I can. I think Memphis can do it. Like they have a lot of pieces. They have a good coach, good system. I think they can hold on. I don't know if they're necessarily going to get hot and cruise into this. Like, oh wow, they could really give the Lakers or Clippers a run. I don't think it's going to be like that, but I think Memphis should hold on. But it's like we said, you can't count out the Spurs. They just know how to get it done. Yeah. So it's going to make. I think it's so good though that the Spurs have started that well, and that Phoenix has started that well too, because it's going to make for we're not having a team. Yeah, because I even thought before the start Phoenix will lose the first 2, and then they'll just sit Booker and Ayton and not worry about it, and we're not going to have that, which is great. That's all you can ask for. It's what Adam Silver wants. It's what the players want. These guys don't want to be stuck in a bubble and not being able to play and have meaningful games. So I think that's really cool. But it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, that's an incredible point. Actually, the fact that the way you just said about those teams winning games early and making sure that their star players do play, because it will make for, going back to what you said earlier, the competition to continue to sort of be at the level that it has been.
Throughout. I would have put money that Phoenix would have been resting guys from Game 3 on, because I thought they'll lose the first 2 and it won't be worth it to have their star players get hurt.
Yeah.
But thankfully, they figured it out.
No, that's an incredible point. Let's close things out. And actually, since you just mentioned the possible injury that happened, I do want to obviously give a shout out to Jonathan Isaac, who unfortunately tore his ACL after coming back, recovering. Kneeling and all that stuff aside, you never want to see a guy that's worked so hard to come back and suffer that brutal injury. And obviously, prayers and thoughts up to him for a speedy recovery. But let's close things out with any other things that have surprised you or disappointed you at all. For me, being the big Luka fan that I am, Dallas too. I mean, they're not going to drop up or down, but there is a bit of concern in terms of seeing them lose to Houston in that heartbreaking loss. But then another, comeback. They lost their lead against Phoenix, again, a team that shouldn't be beating Dallas, they lost that game. I'm a little concerned for Dallas coming off these 2 games, even though Luka's looked pretty solid.
Yeah, I agree. You want to talk about what separates the really good teams from the elite teams, and that's the ability to close. And you can't blow a 13-point halftime lead on a neutral
to
court.
To the Phoenix Suns of all teams.
Exactly. If it was like the Lakers or something, that's one thing to allow a comeback. But you gotta, especially with the talent they have and the coaching. Rick Carlisle is one of the 5 probably 5 or 6 best
Oh, yeah.
coaches we have.
No
So
doubt.
there's no excuse for that. So like you're exactly right. Like they need to kind of tighten some things up here, especially if they want to make any noise in the playoffs. Right now they're 7, which is a matchup with the Clippers in the first round, and I'm sure they would rather not play any of the LA teams in the first round. The only thing I would add to kind of wrap it up is just I think everybody's on game 2, 3, or 4 depending on when people are seeing this, and I think it's going to be so interesting because of we've had such parity at the beginning here with some teams winning that we didn't expect that all these seedings are just going to change. I mean, you look at the West, the Lakers, if they win the night against Utah, I think they clinch it. So that won't change from there. But the Clippers are 5.5 back, Denver's 7, Houston's 8.5, Utah's 8.5, and OKC is 9.5. So I mean, just that 4 games right there separating 2 through 6. Anything can happen between those slots there. I still think the Clippers probably hang on to the 2, but then still 3 through 6. I mean, that's huge. That depends. That changes who the Clippers play in the second round. That changes who the Lakers play. I mean, if the Lakers, I think the Lakers could beat Houston. I'm not like terribly worried, but it's one of those like I'd rather not deal with Houston for 6 games that are just like really. You feel like exhausted. You feel like you've been like chasing around a bad kid around the house for 6 games. It's like stop. So I think the play, and like a team like Utah, like. They're kind of the team that I think everybody wants to play because they don't have Bogdanovich. Gobert is a liability on offense, and Conley's been better, but he's still kind of been iffy this year. And Mitchell, can he carry it by himself? We don't know that. So like they could be a team that like people like the Clippers and Lakers are like hoping like, hey, fall to this, fall to the 7 seed, fall to if the Lakers case, fall to the 4 or 5 seeds, so they can get them in the second round. So it's going to be really interesting. And same with the East too. I don't mean to like not talk about the East, but it's a little more spread out there.
Yeah, it's not quite as interesting, honestly.
no, but just with the West, like every team has, I think, everybody has their own unique strengths in the West, and it's so different from the small ball to the Lakers playing a little bit bigger to the Clippers with their wings. Like there's so many different styles of winning out in the West that I think it's going to be so interesting to see how those stars start to align as we get to that 6th, 7th, and 8th game. And obviously we'll do more of these as we get closer, but just something to keep an eye on moving forward.
No, definitely. I'm going to close out with this last question. Do you think LeBron turns it on tonight and we see sort of what we're used to seeing in LeBron? You mentioned Bogdanovich not being there. He's usually the guy that I think is matched up against LeBron in Utah's starting lineup. Are we going to see LeBron back to normal today, or you think it's going to be a little bit more of a transition?
I think we'll see like 95% of the LeBron we should. Okay. I think if I have watched enough of those guys play, especially LeBron over the years, I think he recognizes that if they win tonight, they clinch. So I think him and AD should put it on their own, to-do list to go out there and just dominate from start to finish. Don't mess around. Don't let Utah hang around because they are scrappy and they are a good defensive team. So it's not somebody you want to try to put them away early. They've had a lot of success against them this year, and with Bogdanovich being out, it kind of leaves that gap. Like Ingles isn't really somebody that can guard LeBron for 40 minutes a game. And, some of the other guys are a little undersized. So I think you'll see a vintage LeBron. If you want me to put a number on it, I'll go Lakers 113, Jazz 97, and we'll go LeBron 25, 11, and 8.
Okay, I hope you're right. I'm honestly hoping you're right because I want to see. I'm excited for this matchup tonight, and that's kind of the one game that hasn't started yet as we're getting ready to get off this broadcast here. San Antonio Philly is just getting ready to start, so another 2 games that could possibly make you mad back to back. I don't know if you put any more money on Philly again, but
no, I have not. But I do want to add, since you closed out with something, I would like to detour just for 30 seconds.
Yeah, definitely. No,
and I know you've already heard this from me and others, but I want to wish you a big congratulations. For those of you watching who don't know, Raj accepted the job with the NFL. You're working with their digital video team. Now you're going to be remote now, but hopefully going to Los Angeles. Is that the plan?
Once the office is open back up in LA, I'll be out there. It's just a matter of when.
So you guys better tweet at him now, follow him now before he's famous in LA, because once he's gone, he's gone. But no, congratulations. Just want to throw that out there. Well earned, and try to give me like 30 minutes a week on a podcast if you can or something.
I appreciate that, man. No, definitely. I'm already having so much fun. This is only 2 episodes into this return thing. We got a long way to go, and I'm already having so much fun doing this thing. But I do appreciate you giving the shout out to that, and I'm looking forward to it. So but we will be back here on Wednesday in just a couple of days. Hopefully Jordan won't be mad about tonight's results from the game, but I guess we'll report back in a couple of days. Social medias, like we said, are down there. Follow Nuts and Bolts Sports on our website as well as on all social media. Thank you to anybody that joined, commented, whatever it may be, and we'll be back in a couple of days.
See ya.